to a BYU season officially begins edition of the College Huddle. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Make sure you are. We're growing here. Literally in the last 3 weeks, we've doubled in size. We appreciate everybody who's tuning in. We're going to start dropping daily College Huddle content on your doorstep every single day. If you're a college football fan, be a part of the College Huddle. Check out the website, thecollegehuddle.com. That's thecollegehuddle.com. 86 podcasts coast to coast, including your BYU Cougars. And of course, let us know what you think about what we think down in the comment section below. We would love to hear from you, BYU fans or BYU haters. All right, going into the season, there was a lot of questions about BYU. You know, they lose their starting quarterback from a season ago, and Jake Retzlaff, I believe that's how it's pronounced. He pronounces his name. Um, and there was a lot of questions there from BYU fans, from people from outside the program looking in. How would the Cougars respond? Um, was this going to be a down year? And I remember talking at the time that I thought BYU was going to be able to bounce back pretty well because of the culture that they have there, the consistency that they have there, the maturity in the program that is there. Sure enough, they have started the season off really well. They are one of just a handful of undefeated teams at this moment, on top of the Big 12, right there with Texas Tech. But now the season begins for BYU. Here's what I mean by that. So far this year, here is who BYU has beaten: Portland State, okay, FCS school, 69 to nothing, blowout. Stanford, 27 to 3 at home, again, blowout. Stanford, literally a lame duck coach this season, looking to actually start their real rebuild next year. And I'll have a video about that later this week as well. On the road, East Carolina, 34-13, blowout. And then it got interesting in Boulder against the Buffs, against Prime, Colorado, 24-21, close win, but this was a team you just beat not too long ago in the a better Colorado team, one might argue, in the bowl game, 36-14. And then back home again, taking on the Mountaineers of West Virginia, 38-24, before going on the road for the second time into a hostile environment in Arizona, 33-27. BYU 6-0, decent wins, some big wins, but now the season begins because none of those games were against ranked opponents. None of those games were against teams that you could say equal in talent even. Maybe Arizona, if they end up winning that football game, might sneak in to the top 25 if they continue to win. But now you have rival Utah. You have Iowa State in a couple weeks. On the road at Texas Tech, TCU, a surprising and top 25 ranked Cincinnati Bearcats before finishing off against UCF. I look at this schedule and I say, we're going to find out what BYU's made of right here, right now. This is where the rubber meets the road. Utah, BYU. One might argue, if Texas Tech defeats BYU later in the season, that this game between Utah and BYU might kind of be a possible CFP play-in implication type of game, possibly here. I know that the CFP committee is definitely going to be watching this game very closely to see which one of these two teams could get a leg up in the season. Utah loses this game after having lost earlier this season to Texas Tech. The fact that BYU is undefeated at this point, the fact that BYU just won a head-to-head game, probably eliminates Utah from the playoffs, in all honesty here. Despite BYU being 6-0, a loss to Utah, and then a loss to Texas Tech in a couple weeks, I'm assuming that probably eliminates the Cougars from the playoffs. So this is a huge football game from those implications. And just looking at the schedule, the way it sets up, This is where BYU, you find out what they're made of. Again, Utah, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Cincinnati, four big time opponents. TCU, UCF, I'm not impressed with those teams, but those other four, that's where the season is going to be won or lost. Now, let's talk about Coach K. Yeah, I call him Coach K on purpose. I don't want to butcher his name, okay? Um, this guy is incredibly impressive to me. I've watched him from afar, watched him build this program. He's incredibly invested. That is obvious. So tuned in to the BYU culture, the community, what it stands for, all the things that makes BYU unique. He is all about that. Plus, he has his own culture as well. And then when you mix those two things together, I think it just gives this a very unique, tough, mature football team that he's been able to kind of build and construct over time, and they're reaping the benefits of that. BYU is a really, really good football team. And let me give you example number one. I leaned into this at the beginning. Let's talk about it now. You've got a freshman quarterback in Bear Backmeyer, okay? Now, he's a freshman, and you don't expect a ton from freshman quarterbacks, especially after losing your big guy in Jake, who everybody loved, who was the transfer portal darling late in the season because of the incident, which we're not going to get into here. But let's look at the stats between these two guys right now, okay? Backmeyer, 1,220 passing yards. Jake's 1,167. Touchdowns. Bears got 8. Jake, 4. Interceptions, which is what you're always concerned about if you have a young starting quarterback. Bears got 3. Jake doesn't have any. Understandable, but they're not throwing the ball as much at Tulane as they were in BYU. QBR, Bear 73.8, Jake 76.3. Very close. And I think you look at those two things and you got to say, okay, would we rather have Jake at quarterback? Most BYU fans right now would probably say no. We're happy with Bear. But I think from the outside looking in, you say, yeah, we'd probably rather have Jake. But if you can't have Jake, this guy has stepped into that situation, has performed admirably, and looks really good doing it. And so, huge props to, again, Coach K, bringing him in, developing another quarterback, putting him in the system. System works around a quarterback who can distribute the football well. But he's not the only guy on this team that's worth mentioning right now. The running game looks great. LJ Martin, he's had a 101 carries for 652 yards, 6.6 and a half yards per carry. Fantastic. 4 rushing touchdowns to go along with that as well. And he's got 9 catches for 77 yards to go along with Chase Roberts, 420 receiving yards and 3 scores on 22 catches, and Parker Kingston's 330 yards, 2 touchdowns on 23 catches. Um, let's also mention Ryan, the tight end, Carson Ryan, 14 catches, 211 yards, 2 touchdowns. Again, Bear distributing the ball, good running game, pretty good offensive line. BYU looks every bit the part that they did, in my opinion, when Jake was kind of running the show a little bit. Is he as dynamic as Jake? No, probably not. But again, young quarterback put into a tough situation, performing admirably. Again, pat on the back, Coach K. You're doing it there in BYU, and you're doing it at a very high level. Now we get to see, can you step up your game? Can everybody step up their game there in Provo just a little bit more? Because you're going to need it against Utah. Speaking of Utah, this is what I love to do. I love to look at the history of things here, right? So, from about 1920 to 1960, this thing was ran by Utah, right? I think BYU squeezed in maybe like 5 wins, 6 wins, 7 wins, something like that, in the better part of over the course of uh, 50 years. Okay, and then the tides turned greatly in the 1970s. BYU became a much better program than Utah was, and the pendulum swung completely to the other side. And then Utah comes back again in the early 2000s, Urban Meyer, Utah, and the next thing you know, the Utes are kind of running the show again. But interesting of note, last two games here, okay? You have BYU in 2021 winning 26-17, and then in 2024, 22-21. So they've won two in a row. Even though Utah owns the all-time record at 60, 33, and 4, BYU has won two in a row. And if this trend continues with huge swings and momentum in this rivalry, Utah's got to feel pretty good about their chances of winning this football game based off momentum, based off the fact that it's in Provo, it's a home game, based off the fact that you've got a lot to play for here. This is the type of game I look at and think to myself, I think BYU can win this thing. I think BYU's got a really good chance of coming away with a big win here. And if they do, if BYU can beat Utah in this football game Saturday night, they're in the driver's seat to be the only team, I think, in the Big 12 who can legitimately look Texas Tech in the eye and say, we can beat you. Utah didn't do it at home. And if BYU beats Utah, they're not going to get another chance to do it. So BYU becomes that team that can look Texas Tech in the eye and say, we can beat you. And I think that will be incredibly interesting in a couple weeks later. But they're going to take care of business against Utah. They're going to take care of business against Iowa State. And yes, I know Iowa State's dropped a couple. Still a very dangerous team, incredibly dangerous team. Cannot overlook them. The team from Ames, Iowa. But all things considered, BYU culture, right? They've got longevity of coaching staff here as well. So does Utah, by the way. But time to build the program, create the culture, create the dynamic you need to where when you go through adversity, when you lose a quarterback like they did, a major player in your team, it's not that it's plug and play, but in this case, you've plugged in and he's playing well. And now all of a sudden, BYU is in a place where they're looking at their rival in a huge game with national implications on the season for both programs. You got to be excited if you're a college football fan in the state of Utah. Who do you think's going to win this game Saturday? Is it going to be the Cougars? Is it going to be the Utes? I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know who you think is going to win and why they will win. And of course, if you are a BYU fan, let me know what it is. Did I miss anything about BYU as far as why they're good, their culture, the maturity of the program, everything that they have in place there in Provo? Is there anything else I'm missing that you think is important to know about the Cougars? So when I sit down and watch this game Saturday night, I'm plugged in, ready to go, and I know what I need to know before watching that football game. Again, please consider subscribing to the channel, guys. We'll be back with another college football video.